Yeah, hi. Ooh, okay, that was a lot louder than I expected. It went from like no sound to a lot of sound. My name is Trinh. I'm a photographer, visual journalist, organizer, activist. Most of my work is in photojournalism, documentary photography, street photography, and portraits.
Okay, my name is Jenny, and I work in kind of fashion, beauty, media, publishing. It's kind of complicated, I guess. But I'm basically in the creative industry, and I'm a creative director.
Cool. Okay. Fully vax gang. Negative test gang. All right. Anyway, my name is Lloyd Ortuoste. I am the chief executive there and co-founder at Baonanas. It's a what is it exactly? It's a dessert company that focuses on just spreading happiness and a new take on banana pudding. We've done things like smorgasbord the last 6 years. We do catering. We have 2 storefronts. Nationwide shipping, but I think the most important thing is we try to really utilize our Filipino roots, my co-founder is my fiance, to really just try to change the game of desserts and really try to introduce Filipino flavors into a market that's kind of been missing that.
That sounds good. So to kick us off this morning, when entering any unconventional field for the Asian community, I think that a lot of us who enter these fields can really agree that we have had a lot of anxiety maybe telling our family. And so to kick us off, I wanted to ask, how did you go about telling your family about your chosen career path? And we'll kick this off to Jenny first.
Okay. So I am now a creative director. I did start out my career as like a graphic designer, and I didn't really tell my parents. I just did it because. I grew up poor, and my parents, when they were able to like work full time and they started their own business, they were working all the time. So I kind of was by myself a lot. I had to take care of myself. So when it came time to go to college, I kind of figured that out on my own. I didn't really have support or knowledge. My parents didn't really know anyway. So I decided to go to college, and then I was like, I'm going to get accepted into a college, and I'm just going to run away. So when it came time to go, I told my parents, I was like, I'm going to college. And they're like, okay. But they had their own business, and I think the hard thing about having this type of career, obviously everyone always says like, don't be an artist because there's no money in that. I would argue against that. But it's, I think for most immigrants, your parents want you to be like doctors and lawyers and whatnot. My parents, because they started their own business, that's their American dream. So the equivalent to that is like taking over their business. And because I didn't show any interest in taking over their business, didn't matter what else I decided to do, because it's not that it wasn't good enough, it just was never gonna get like acknowledgement or validation and whatnot. So my parents still don't know what I do. We talked about this for a minute. I try to explain it to them all the time, but they still don't know what I do. But no, it's okay, because like I stopped seeking validation from my parents like in my 30s, because I just realized parents are older, messed up humans, and it's all good, So that's how I kind of worked it out.
Thank you. Yeah, I really like how you kind of carved your own path, and what's really key in what you said is that you stopped seeking their validation because you really found happiness in what you were doing, and kind of broke the stereotype of like you can't make money as an artist. So that's great. Yeah. And then Lloyd or Cindy, do you guys have any salient points you wanted to add to this that maybe Jenny didn't touch on?
Talking to my mom has been a constant struggle my entire life. I think many of us in this room feel that same way. But I actually wanted to tell my mom that I wanted to be a photographer back when I was in college, and I had changed my major and everything. She wanted me to be a doctor or a pharmacist. She still wants me to be a pharmacist. I'm like, Mom, it's too late for that now. We've crossed that bridge. But I knew that I was really interested in doing photography back then. But, you know, with the pressure of my parents and society telling me that pursuing a creative career was not lucrative enough, I actually ended up being a lawyer, which is all because of my mom, to please my mom. But I was really unhappy. And so, like, after going through the whole motions of becoming a lawyer and passing the bar and everything, you know, I just decided, like, I didn't want to do this. I didn't feel any happiness or joy doing law, and I decided, you know, I want to pursue my passion again, my passion for photography that I had found, you know, when I was younger, but I just never had the, you know, opportunity to manifest that, right? To manifest my goals and my dreams. And so to this day, like, when I try to tell my mom, like, I want to be a photographer, she still thinks, oh, that's nice that you want to do this hobby. I'm like, no, Mom, it's not a hobby. Like, this is what I want to do with my life. She's like, sure. I'm like, no, seriously, Mom, like, this is what I want to do with my life. And she still kind of doesn't fully, like, comprehend that. Like, she still thinks, like, I should go get, like, a government job, as if that's gonna, like, you know, solve all my problems. You know, I'm doing okay. I'm like, Mom, I'm doing okay. She always likes to think of me as, like, I'm so poor. Like, I'm a poor, starving artist. I'm gonna, like, die in a gutter somewhere, you know? And it's just, like, it's because my mom's a Vietnamese refugee, so, like, her past experience is from trauma and from poverty, and so, like, I think a lot of our parents have this scarcity mentality that, like, we're gonna be poor and, like, we're not gonna survive in this country, and so, like, that's their way of thinking. So I think a lot of the conversations that I have with my mom about what I'm pursuing, what I'm doing, there's a disconnect. And it's because of that past trauma, which I think is very relatable to a lot of immigrant parents, right? And I'm sure a lot of people feel that way in this room too.
Yeah, thank you, Cindy. We'll definitely touch more on mental health coming up. But you did have a career path. You are doing it. You are an amazing photographer as well as photojournalist and doing what fulfills you. And so I just wanted to talk, if you could speak more on how did you take that leap? Because, you know, sometimes when we go into a path, we can feel pigeonholed. Like, I got my degree in this, or I'm making money in this, it's comfortable, can I do it? So how did you take that leap and make that switch?
I mean, it was difficult. It was not an easy leap, as you know, as you framed it. It really took a lot of lows. So I was at my lowest of my low. I was a newly graduated, you know, lawyer. I was making only $7.25 an hour. Like, my employer literally paid me minimum wage, and I was a lawyer. So I was making the same amount of money as like college interns, right? So I was like completely broke. I had no money. I felt worthless because I thought, you know, I had done what people told me to do. I had succeeded in school. I had, quote unquote, achieved the American dream of, you know, getting higher education and trying to make my family proud. But here I was, you know, without a career, without a job, without any money, you know, pretty much on the verge of having to leave New York City because I couldn't afford it. And it just really took, like, a lot of faith and a lot of willpower to just be like, you know what, like, this isn't working for me, and I need to figure out something else that can work for me. And the moment that I had made the leap from law to photography was, you know, I made the realization that, like, if I'm going to be struggling this much, if I'm going to be this broke anyway, I might as well do what I care about, do what I love, and do what I'm passionate about. Because at the end of the day, it's like we all, I think we all want something in our lives that, like, has some meaning. At least for me, I feel like whatever I do, whatever work that I do, I really want it to have meaning. I want it to have impact, and I want people to resonate with what I'm producing, the work that I'm producing. And so for me, it was just literally taking that leap and feeling like I need to do something that I care about, that I feel will have an impact on people. And so my work that I do today, you know, I really want to uplift the voices of marginalized folks and, you know, people who don't have a lot of platform, who don't have a voice in our media. Like, that's what I really want to do with my photography, is really give a voice to these people that, you know, we don't think about, we don't talk about, we don't discuss these communities because, you know, they're poor and they're marginalized, and, you know, our media doesn't pay attention to them. And as Asian Americans especially, we're often ignored, we're often invisibilized, right, in this country. So this is really, like, it really took me a lot of work, effort, willpower, and just like the tenacity to just like be like, you know what, I want something different for my life, and this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna make it happen somehow.
Yes, and you know, your determination really showed in that you're doing it now, so that's great. Moving the conversation, like, what was the most challenging thing about entering your field as an AAPI, considering it's somewhere that we're really underrepresented? And I'll give this one on to Jenny.
Okay, so I would say in entering and being in my industry, there's two things I feel are the most challenging. First is being a woman of color, I think is one thing, and the second one is networking. So being a woman of color, and then especially as an Asian woman working in an industry that is predominantly basically like dominated by white people and then white males. I get a lot that they're in interviews and whatnot that people are like, oh, you're a great director, and like, you're a woman of color, like, that's so cool. And I'm always just like, oh, is it really? And then I remember that like most other creative directors are like white guys that think they're God. And so I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm special. And so that does make me want to keep going and give me a sense of pride and validation to like keep making it better for people that are like me. And I think the hard part is like, because I'll never be seen as equal to like, you know, my allies and my white counterparts, like that already is such an uphill battle. And my personality, like, I am more vocal and I am outspoken. So I share my thoughts and opinions probably more than maybe the typical, you know, stereotypical like Asian, but also like more than most other people. That still doesn't mean that I am feeling that I get heard and seen. And there's been in one situation in particular, like with my current job, there was a time where there was a big event, and there's basically the teams that helped to put the big event on are like 4 teams, and there are 4 VPs. And at one point during like a public meeting, like a town hall, my boss and manager had thanked everyone for that event, and she thanked the 3 other VPs, and they happened to be white, and I was the one VP that was left off. I was not white, and I don't like to hang on to that as anything, but I also didn't fit the mold that these other people did. And so, you know, she thanked the rest of them, and then that was like so crushing to me, because it basically showed like, okay, no matter how hard I work, no matter how outspoken I am, no matter how bold, no matter, you know, what I do, people are still just gonna leave me off, like, and not remember me and not acknowledge me. What's worse about that is that my team saw that too. So what does that say about me as their leader, you know, not getting the recognition that I should have gotten in that sense? At the very, you know, least of it, I worry that it signals that like there's a limit to like, the acknowledgement, the advocacy, like the power that I can have to advocate for my team and people working for me. So that really sucks, and I try to work against that anyway. I definitely try to pull a seat up to the table. You know, lately I've been feeling like I'm just like, you know, fuck that table, I just want to make my own. Like, I don't care anymore about trying to fit into, you know, everything else that's going on. And then the other thing I think that's really hard is like networking. And it's kind of like, you know, Cindy touched on that, is like, so most of the people in my industry went to like a trade school, like they went to art school, film school, and things like that. And I had an opportunity to go to art school. I ended up, because of some circumstances, ended up not working out. So I went to University of Texas Austin, which is like Wars, still a good school. I just ended up partying instead of like, you know, focusing on like art and stuff like that. But it ended up, you know, working out anyway. But after college, like, I didn't know that people were going to New York and like getting free internships and then working in a magazine and all that stuff. Like, I really had to hustle. And so, and I wasn't able to work right after college. So when I did get ready to, you know, work, I was like, okay, I'm ready to go to New York. Like, I want a job there. I applied to like 100 places. Definitely like unpaid internships, even to like go into student programs, because I was like a new student, so I was like, maybe they'll accept me, but I just need to land somewhere. And I happened to find this ad, and it was an ad for Nylon magazine, which ended up being like, you know, my first job. And it was an ad that was 3 months old, and it said it was for a 3-month trial internship. And so I did the math, and I was like, 3 months, that's like now. So if that person didn't work out, like maybe they're hiring for this position again. So I did some research on the hiring manager, and I emailed them, and they were like, oh yeah, like, you know, let's meet. So I ended up interviewing for the job. I got it. I moved to New York right away. And I mean, I got the job on the spot because also like I was good and smart, and also I was going to work for free. So they were like, yes, you know. And so, but I didn't have like a network. I didn't know. I wasn't in a sorority or fraternity either. Like I didn't know anyone. I just had to hustle and kind of figure it out for myself. And eventually, you do end up building a network for people that you have genuine relationships with, and not networking in the way that like they kind of teach you in school, like business classes and stuff, where they're like, get all the business cards and get everyone's email. It's like your network becomes your true, genuine connection. So I'm really thankful for that. But that's definitely an uphill battle, like not knowing the way to go or the path to get to where you're going and trying to develop it for yourself.
Right, so we definitely, I heard a couple of things of like, you know, what's challenging is that you don't necessarily get you weren't getting the validation for work despite the hard work and moving up and doing really well, and also not really having the way paved for you. So, but on the flip side, you really had the tenacity, the determination to really do this and be great and find success for what it meant for you. So circling back to your first idea though, of not only not needing your parents' validation, but of also not needing to seek it from work, because you know within yourself there's a certain limit that you may not, no matter how far you reach, you may not get the validation, but you know you're doing well. So definitely, yeah, and it's great to hear how you've like navigated those challenges.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what was something that was most challenging to your mental health? And I want to bring Lloyd in for this one.
Let's see. Most challenging. I like to think that the first 3 to 4 years of Baonanas was fairly simple and fairly fun. You know, it was at a point in my life where maybe 6 months before, maybe like a year before Baonanas accidentally happened. There's like a whole other story. I was just very lost. I was in school not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I was actually fortunate enough that my parents were just like, you know, we're not going to pressure you to do something, but just like figure it out, because you're like 22, 23, and you're kind of just bouncing around classes and schools and stuff. And so the toughest thing came in 2018. You know, we basically bootstrapped, my fiance and I, from day one until, which is 2015. So the first 3 years we bootstrapped, meaning that whatever money we made, we put it back into the company. You know, we never kind of got investors involved. We were just able to really build it from the ground up and really learn as many lessons as humanly possible. Just, you know, on a smaller scale, I guess. And in 2018, unfortunately, when we took out a huge SBA loan to build out our very first storefront, we were scammed by the general contractors that were actually supposed to build it out. And to me, it was probably like the biggest test of my life. You know, it was, you know, I was fortunate to be one of those business owners that say like, you know, that never would ever, business never got into the relationship, but in that moment, just because it was so draining and so stressful and so just tough, where a project that should have taken around 4 months took around 16 months, you know, and you know, luckily, thank goodness, like we were really able to just work through it, to really get through it. We were supposed to open March 2020, but everyone knows what happened in March 2020. And you know, like I think I need to attribute just being able to get through that and just be able to be on the other side of that, where you know now the company is doing a lot better. You know, we were able to just not only make it through the lockdown, but actually just grow from it in a multitude of ways. But yeah, like I think in retrospect, if I wasn't able to get through that general contractor thing and like really just persevere and just really test myself in terms of resilience, and I don't know if I would have been able to pivot the way that we did when the pandemic went down. You know, like I like to think that the first 2 to 3 years were so rosy and kind of easy, and then when you know we were ultimately tested not only as a business but also as a couple, that like as cheesy as it sounds, like our love was able to persevere through that, and in turn like the business was able to persevere through that too. And so yeah, I think now it's like every day just shines so much brighter after getting through all that. Therapy helped too. I've been doing that for like a month to 2 months, you know, and I've never felt so balanced and kind of just, I now finally have time to see friends, family, and do really cool and fun things like this, which like during the pandemic and during the whole contractor thing, like I knew I was gonna get here like sooner or later if I just kept thugging it out. And yeah, so whatever it is, go to therapy if you can, and just continue to be resilient.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, your mindset is probably very key in that whole situation, because somewhere where someone could have easily given up, you kept going, and that's what sets you apart, you know, and especially when you're pursuing a career where you don't have as much support, or you don't have someone that paved the way for you. Like, having that mindset of, you know what, I can get through this, and once I get through this, like taking one thing at a time. You did it, and you're doing it, so awesome. And I'm so happy to hear you say you sought therapy as well, because it's another outlet as well. So yeah, and also Jenny, I know that you wanted to speak on this as well. What was something that was most challenging for your mental health, and maybe how you worked through it or overcoming it?
Yes, so there were a couple jobs I had, not this job right now, but a couple jobs before where I just kept getting managers who were bad. And most cases it was like gaslighting, putting down, shame, things like that. And what I learned from those experiences is basically, if you're secure but you work for someone insecure, that's not fun. And that translates into these things that can happen. And then, you know, stereotypes come into play of being like an Asian woman and being expected to be the model minority and submissive and things like that. They think that you're just that we just want to put our heads down and work really hard, or thankful to be here. And like, while I am those things, it's taken me decades to unlearn what my parents' trauma and what they passed on to me of unworthiness and whatnot. But resilience to go through. So in one situation in particular, when I was tested, it was a job I had where, you know, the first year was good, I had good managers, and then the second year it changed and there were bad managers, and I was moved under one person and then another. And I was under this woman who, she had a really bad reputation, but I was still, the respect was there, I was excited to work with her, you know, I just tried to just do my job. But over time, because my personality is one that, I guess, again, when you're secure and you're working for people that are insecure, you just being who you are is like a protest, and also hard for them to be who they are. Because then you come up and you show more strength, and you know who you are, and you're confident, and they don't like that, so they try to kind of like put you down and whatnot. So there was one situation where we had a meeting, I was a little frustrated, and I was just being, you know, keeping it real, and I was talking about the things that we needed to do. That manager didn't like it, so what she ended up doing was having a violent verbally abusive talk to me, and then in front of the whole floor, and then pulled other people into a room to like berate me for being frustrated in that meeting. And this was in San Francisco, so like being frustrated in a meeting in New York, I feel is like a regular Tuesday, but in San Francisco, it's like absolutely not. You must be nice, and that's it, right? So, and you can only talk about like nice things. So I got in trouble, and then she just like came down so hard on me, and I was like, okay, I hear you. I will be better about this. You know, can we take a step back because this conversation isn't really respectful? Still went in. The next day again, I tried to tell her, like, look, I hear what you're saying, but like also we crossed a line, so like next time, please don't do that. And she wasn't having it. I went to HR. HR didn't care. I may have gotten frustrated, but the punishment didn't fit the crime. And she started to harass me, send me messages, follow up on emails and stuff. And catch me. And so what I ended up doing was reaching out to my mentor, who gave me some jargon to like, she was like, just email the CEO and use these legal terms. And I was like, great. So I emailed the CEO, and I'm like, this is a hostile environment. I feel uncomfortable. Like, I really was scared I was going to lose my job because of this one bad conversation with my manager. So I do that. And I knew the CEO, and then after that, you know, I ended up not having to report to this woman. That's all I asked for. And I was really tested, and basically the result of that was like the company went bankrupt and everyone lost their jobs. So I'm actually really satisfied with how that situation worked out. So I was like, thank you, universe. But you know, it really tested me because during when she was like being this way, she was gaslighting me. She was telling me these things about me that like I'd never heard about myself. How like, you're a bad leader, people don't like working with you and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I am? Like, really? And I was like, no, people say this about you, so why are you saying that about me? And I was really confused at like why she was doing this. I still don't really understand why people gaslight, but anyways, I was in therapy, and I managed to power through and just not listen to that. And the thing I think I learned the most from that situation is like, when you are being who you really are, no one can really bet against you because you know who you are and you know what you stand for. So people try to sit here and say things about you and put you down, especially managers in your workplace that you know, feel like you're encroaching on their position and they don't want to be usurped. Will use anything they can to like pick at your insecurities and put you down so that they can be lifted up. And I think the main thing to stand with there is like, you've got to stand up for yourself, and sometimes you're like the only person that is willing to do that. But it has to be you. You've got to do that for you. Otherwise, you know, because no one else is going to do that for you.
Yes, Jenny, I love all of that. You know that you touched on a really important thing is that when you're being gaslit, the number one way to protect yourself from it is to stick to your reality. Because when you're confident in yourself and you know what is true and not, what you accept is true or not about yourself, that's the number one way to protect yourself, because so no one else can tell you otherwise. So, love your story. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And so, thinking about this, you know, it can be really lonely it can feel lonely doing something that where no one's paved the path, it's something that you don't feel as much support on. But who was your first ally? Because no road is necessarily traveled completely alone. So you could talk about Lloyd, like who was your first ally in your field?
Yeah, so I think my first like real ally and mentor, his name is Desi. He's the owner and CEO of Sweet Berry Bowls. It's like an acai spot. They have like 12 different locations. And you know, through a friend's like boyfriend that randomly we were catering for a Squarespace event. She happened to be there. It's just a wild connection that was made. I want to say like near the end of 2019, and he was really the one that, you know, he had an MBA in finance. He was able to grow his company from one location to 12. You know, he was such a, not only an ally, but also just a friend in just helping me kind of never lose sight at the end of the tunnel, you know, because at the time, like, that's when we first found out that the whole thing was a scam, and we were kind of scrambling to get the store built out throughout the pandemic. You know, he was the one always reaching out and kind of letting me know about what kind of SBA help there would be. And Trisha, my fiance, she's a labor law attorney, so she was also on top of like all that stuff too. Gotta give her credit for that, don't wanna ignore that. But like usually, the first one that kind of was able to achieve things that I want to achieve, you know, of just really being able to grow something out of nothing, really. And you know, like he would talk to me about moments where he felt like he was being kind of looked down on or whatever, maybe because so he's actually half Filipino, half Indian, and so you know, like he was just someone that was able to just be there for me as a mentor. He was someone that kind of helped me understand that how important it is to have a support system, you know, and that like no matter how tough things get, never lose sight of like your North Star and kind of who you are as an individual, and that you know, anyone that you can connect with that has good vibes, like try your best to keep that alive. And so he's inspired me to be an ally and a mentor to like people that are starting new businesses. You know, I think at the beginning, I think it's always the toughest, and so if ever I could kind of lend a hand to actually help any aspiring entrepreneurs, that's definitely, you know, one of my missions is just to help save them from any mistakes that I've made.
No, that's so important about reframing, you know, different career paths that aren't as conventional in our community, is not only making a place at the table, but pulling others up with you. You know, we are very community oriented, and that's the way that we begin to break the stereotypes, and we begin to break the model minority, and we don't allow that more people to gaslight us. So that's great, Lloyd. I love that you're doing that. And so to wrap us up, I just want to leave us with something positive, you know, because as difficult as it may be, we also have to celebrate our joys and what brings us and what gives us strength every day to keep doing what we're doing. So what is something that brings you joy in your career? And so we'll go down the line here. So start with Cindy.
Yeah, I think right now it's really important for us to also celebrate ourselves, even as much as what, you know, there's so much terrible things happening right now, right? I mean, right now we've got all the, you know, Stop Asian Hate movement, dealing with the violence, the racism that we've encountered over the last year, the movement for Black liberation, and being in community with our Black community, our Black brothers and sisters and people. We need to be with them as much as possible right now. There's the liberation of Palestine right now, which you know, I think we all, as a daughter of refugees, I really resonate also with that struggle, because I feel like, you know, all of our struggles though are interconnected, and I think the liberation of us is the liberation of everyone else. Like, our liberation is bound within each other, right? And then that's also how we can experience joy with one another. Because our struggles are so intertwined, we can also experience joy all together, right? We can also experience the similar you know, experiences that we might have with Latinx people, Black people, Indigenous people, other Asians, right? Not like, we are not a monolith, right? There's a lot of even different Asian Americans within the umbrella of Asian American. And you know, just celebrating our differences while also coming together, I think that is joy right there, is really being in community with each other. And so for me, it's showing up for other BIPOC communities. It's showing up for them, celebrating them as well, celebrating Black joy, celebrating Latinx joy, celebrating LGBTQIA+ joy. I think our joy experiences, they're all connected. And so for me, it's like, just really embracing our cultures. Like, I love our culture. I love Asian culture. I love going out and celebrating with a nice big meal. That is joy for me. I love going to a block party in Bed-Stuy and dancing in the street with like the Black community. That's joy for me. You know, I love going to support my other artist friends. A friend of mine who's here right now has a really amazing photography show about the Latinx community, and I love going to that. That's joy for me. You know, just being there for each other and like experiencing also all of our successes. Because as much as like there's so much terrible things going on in the world right now, we also have amazing, talented people in our communities. I mean, like just right here, this panel is just so talented, so amazing, has so much to offer, and I'm sure everyone here else also in the room has so much to offer, and we're so talented, and I think just celebrating that we are unique, that we're beautiful, that we have a lot to offer this world. I think that is really how I want to experience joy moving forward with my life.
Thank you. Yeah. Jenny.
That was great. First, later, I want to know where you go to get big celebration dinner. In Chinatown.
Lots of food to be in our future.
So what brings me joy is definitely amplifying BIPOC storytelling and then careers, and mainly just BIPOC creative people, because that's who I am, what I know, and where I come from. And the fastest way for me to do that is basically through my job, and I'm fortunate to work in a position that I can do that for people that I work with and that work with me and people that want to get into this industry. So I'm on the Idea Council, which is like a diversity and you know, like all that stuff. Diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever. And there's a careers committee there, and we're working to build like a mentorship program that's focused for BIPOC talent specifically. The North Star being, you know, how do we get them the support and understanding and the advancement that they need, and then we're also looking into, you know, recruiting and retention, and right now companies they have these KPIs that are like, we want to, by 2022, we want to recruit 37% BIPOC. I'm like, what does that mean? Does that mean that 63% still gets to stay? I don't know. But, so I question those things though, and I'm like, well, it's great that you get, you know, a diverse pool, but you have to know how to keep a diverse pool too. So I'm there to really challenge and change the culture, and I say that all the time. And I think the thing that brings me joy is like sometimes when you're trying to say the right thing, people don't like that. But you can do that now more easier than you have before, so that really does bring me joy. And I've advocated for a lot of different people, not just, you know, people of color, but just I really do want to make a platform for artists to shine and be valued. So it's everything from, you know, creative and talent and things like that, but also like I really push for salary, I really push for promotions, I push for sponsorship of visas of people that want to work from different countries. Then I also talk about microaggressions and cultural things that happen in the workplace and meetings and stuff like that. Because to me, like, knowledge is power, so I try to put myself in that position to be the one that advocates for people who can, and because also I'm in a position where I'm one of the few, if not the only person of color that's in a leadership position. I realized after a certain point, like, even though I didn't want to be like the, you know, woke police or whatever, but if I'm not, then I can't pave the way for anyone else to enter that level of leadership. So I care a lot about trying to advance, you know, underrepresented, marginalized communities to be at elevated levels, so that content is better, storytelling is better, our voices are heard. So yeah, that's what brings me joy.
So we have being in community with others, changing structures. How about you, Lloyd?
Let's see. For me, what brings me joy in my career, the first thing that came to mind for me is that I think the restaurant industry is one of the most notorious industries when it comes down to just labor practices. When it comes down to you know, taking advantage of immigrants or taking advantage of people that, you know, aren't able to just make money in America on paper, And so, like, when we're in a place or in an industry where usually people work more than 40 hours without time and a half, health benefits, sick time off benefits, those things are almost always ignored and not really brought up. Like I've worked service jobs where they, purposely just don't bring up things that are your human rights here, and just because maybe someone doesn't have like a work authorization or whatever, some places will just completely ignore that, And so one thing that I'm really proud of and about the company that Trisha and I have built and the culture that we've built is that, we are able to create a community, we are able to kind of have BIPOC individuals just feel wanted, feel heard. We're able to host events and like pop-up shops at our shop where, where people can have a platform to kind of, whether they're an artist or like a small business coming up, they have a space to kind of connect with the world and really showcase what they can do. And I think that, one thing that we've always strived to do is just do business different and really just make it more about a team instead of this employer-employee relationship that I think most places do have, which I think is kind of archaic. I think that, whether you're the CEO or like one of our guest service fairs, you're all part of a team, and that every job and every role is just as important as the next. And I think that if we can kind of push the restaurant industry to really change its practices, there's a lot of inspiring other food businesses out there too that are also doing things like paying above minimum wage, offering health benefits and things like that, or like 2 weeks PTO, which we were proud to finally instill at the beginning of the year for a lot of our team members who, even through the pandemic, even through the whole general contractor thing, like they still believed and loved the company that they hate. They just rode that really rough ride with me, and so to be able to kind of say thank you by taking care of them in that way, it was definitely one of the most fulfilling things that we've accomplished as a company. And there's just so much more that we want to do for our team and for our community. And so, working toward those goals also, I think, brings me joy too, because I think only by really pushing the envelope and being the leaders of like better practices and progressive movements, I think that's the only way that we can make an impact on this world.
Yes, definitely. As like for each one of your journeys, something that I heard that was really salient throughout all of them is really standing for what you believe in and standing for what change you want to see. Although there may not be many AAPI in your industries, there are some, and it's reaching out to those who are willing to, like Lloyd said, like extend that hand out and help you, and you in turn helping someone else. Or Jenny, like changing structures, or Cindy, really speaking out for human rights and saying, hey, we matter. As much as we may have differences, we also have similarities, and where can we find that in between to be able to work together to really bridge the gap? So thank you so much, everyone, or all of you for being here this morning. Do we have time for questions, or?
Yeah, we have about 3 to 5 minutes, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, does anyone have any questions? This is the place. There's a room full of people who are really motivated and here for the same reasons. And so don't be afraid to ask your question or find us later.
Don't be scared.
Yeah.
We're here for you.
Okay. Oh, yes. One right. Oh, sorry. Yes. One there.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here. You talk a lot about being in spaces talk a little bit about being in spaces with other people in our community who kind of are in those traditional career paths, and if you felt out of place there and how you navigated that?
Yeah, I think as a photographer in a white male dominated industry, I definitely always feel out of place when I'm usually at like photography events because you know, I am not a man and I'm not white. So
just to clarify, like spaces, when you're in spaces like this, right, with fellow fellow API community members who maybe are in those quote-unquote traditional paths, and you're the odd one out.
Yeah. I was gonna get to that.
Okay.
Sorry. But yeah, so that we all know like how much all of us feel awkward in you know, spaces where we're not, like, we're the only minority. Whereas when I'm in spaces where I'm actually with my own people, I guess you could say, and I'm not part of the traditional career paths, that I'm also just equally as awkward because I get pressure constantly from my own family, from, you know, just like constantly hearing that I'm not succeeding, I'm a failure because I didn't make it as a doctor or lawyer, right? So sometimes when I am in spaces where I see other Asian Americans who did become like successful doctors, or you know, a lot of my own siblings, right, are also like in science. Like my brother is a chemist. Like, so sometimes I do feel very insignificant. I have stepsisters who's a dentist, right? Typical Asian American traditional job role. And a lot of times, like, I feel like my mom, especially, she constantly still like wishes that I could be that I could have become a dentist as well. And you know, so then because of that like constant you know, negativity from my own parents, from my family, a lot of times, like when I am in spaces where people are doing like traditional, successful, practical job roles, it also makes me very uncomfortable because it makes me feel like I didn't succeed. And that's just literally my mom's voice in my head constantly, because obviously like I know like myself and I know what I've accomplished, and you know, I've worked really, really hard to get where I'm at today, right? And I know that like I deserve these things, I deserve like recognition, that I deserve to get paid for my work, that I deserve like all these things, but it's still like really hard to break through that imposter syndrome like all the time. Like I have imposter syndrome constantly, and it's imposter syndrome with other artists along with other like practical professionals that fits the stereotype, that fits the model minority stereotype. My anxiety in both spaces are equal, right? So I think it's always going to be a constant battle. I think being Asian American, also being a non-binary / woman, like that's also a constant struggle because you're always feeling like you don't belong in spaces. So it's going to be like, I think, a battle that you deal with your whole life. But yeah, that's a very interesting question to think about, like being in the spaces like with our own people, and how a lot of times like our own people can also hurt us, right? Because it's like I've also dealt with a lot of negativity from my own community, you know, like bashing me for like not making enough money or whatever, like not succeeding enough because I don't have like a multi-million-dollar home like they do or whatever, you know. So it's like it's even our own community that sometimes can hurt us as well, right? Which is interesting. I don't know if you guys have follow-ups.
So the only thing I have to add to that is definitely, I feel the same as when I'm in an environment where there's other Asians who do more conventional careers than me. I have always felt awkward, but then it's like I've always stuck out and I've never fit in. So there comes a point where like for me, I'm just like, you just gotta stop trying to fit in and realize that everyone else that's kind of like one way is all the same, and And what makes you different is actually what makes you great. So now when I'm in situations like that where I'm just like, oh, good for you. Don't care. Congratulations. We're all doing what we think we want to do, and it's all good, because again, after a certain point, I think when you stop seeking validation from others and you stop seeking validation from your career, who cares what you do? It's really who you are and what morals and values you have to offer as a person, and the people you care about. And at the end of the day, really, life on earth, it's about love, and that's kind of most of what I care about.
Thank you for your question. And we had one more over here.
Yes, I'm also doing the RG Live for NYSU, so representing the questions online. Going on with the conversation of imposter syndrome, but also about having a mentor and having an ally. Being in an unconventional career path, you might not have other API, to look up to or to find inspiration from. And we were also talking about paving your own way. How do you guys find inspiration when you get stuck or not being able to look up to someone? Representation is very important, and it does help motivate, but being a minority in an unconventional career path, it might get difficult. So just wondering, where is inspiration coming from for you guys?
I actually had a photography mentor, Lee, that passed away earlier in January. And when I was starting out documenting activism in New York, I actually had reached out to him because he was the only Asian American activist photographer that I could find online. So I had reached out to him years ago, and we had connected online. And throughout the years, we just talked about photography, and he talked to me a lot about how he uses camera as a weapon against injustice, which is, when I'm out, I guess I didn't mention this, I forgot, I can't believe I forgot to mention this earlier, but I'm an activist photographer. I've been documenting protests in New York for almost 10 years now. And, when I was looking for role models, he was kind of the only one because there wasn't a lot of other Asian activist photographers. It's very specific. And still to this day, I feel like I'm one of the very few Asian American activist photographers. There's not a lot out there. When I am out at the protests, it's mostly men. It's mostly white men, and it's other people of color, but it's mostly all men. And so being also just a very, I don't fit in a lot with that crowd, and finding Quirky actually helped me a lot in terms of dealing with figuring out if this is something that I could even do, that I could be a part of. And so I think right now, because there's not a lot, right, of Asian American photographers out there, I feel like I hope one day to, also be a role model to other people who want to get into the industry. And I have connected as much as I can with other Asian photographers. As much as you can, I think it is important to network and connect with people that are doing similar things to you. And so I find inspiration from that, just inspiration from connecting with others and finding similarities and finding those experiences that you can relate to, right? Just relating to one another and finding your community of people who are doing something similar to you or pursuing something similar to you, I think is really important. So that's really what inspires me to keep doing this, is obviously to make change, to have an impact on our communities, on the world. These are historic moments that we're going through right now. And as a photographer, my goal is to document these moments, to document our history. So that really, that gives me the inspiration, and just seeing everyone else, right, doing their thing and working so hard towards it. I think that also inspires me.
I have a different viewpoint on mentorship, and maybe it's a little progressive than what we kind of taught in school and when you're younger and whatnot. I feel like when you're in school, everyone's like, network, get a mentor, and you find this mentor, and they tell you what to do and what to think and what to ask and all these things. But how often does that actually happen for everyone? So for me, mentorship, I think is really, it's just knowledge and experience, and that can come from all levels. It doesn't have to come from the top, it can come from the bottom, from the side, from people with different backgrounds and whatnot. And for me personally, I think, of course, I set out on my career to be like, I would love to find, like an Asian creative director to look up to. Eventually I did find someone like that, and they're great, and I'm lucky to have like kind of a small community of people I can go to that I need questions and ask for, and I feel like you will naturally do that as long as you're following, what you want to do and you're being true to yourself, and then your network becomes your mentorship network, and you should be able to tap into your network and be like, hey, what do you think about this, and ask them these questions. So I think in terms of mentorship, it would help to stop thinking that it's just going to come from one person and one point of view and one background and one experience. It's really about the community you build for yourself, and that becomes your network, and then that becomes, what you can deem as kind of mentorship. And eventually, I think what you'll find is, as being, a BIPOC person in an industry where there aren't others, is like, you're it. Like you're probably the mentor. So like figure it out, and then just start to share what you're learning with other people and younger people, and help them find their way and build their path into where you want to go. So I still have yet to find someone I truly like see myself in, and like, eventually I would love to be like a chief creative officer. Like, let me go and find this Asian person that's in that role. I don't know. More likely, I'll probably become it before I find it. So I think that's another thing to think about, is like we try not to think of it as like you're going to search for this truth and this knowledge that's going to come to you. It's like really, it's happening all the time. The only real moment is like what's happening now, and just make the most of that.
That's a gangster line, I like that. I won't find it, but I'm going to become it. That's awesome. Hell yeah. For me, I would say if you don't have a mentor, definitely try to find one. I think it's been one of the biggest helps for me personally. Like, I wasn't the first one in my friend group or like support system to start a business. One of my best friends in the world, Chaz, he started a CrossFit gym back in the day. He changed that and really rebranded himself. And he's one of the few people that really get it to run a business, and someone that we're able to really just talk deeply about. And so, if you're looking for a mentor and you don't have one, I would probably say you got 3 amazing, strong women and a pretty okay guy here. It's not that hard to find our emails, and I think you would be surprised about how accessible people are, especially if it's about asking for help and giving help. Like, as busy as I may be to run a business, if any of y'all hit my email and ask for a 30-minute phone call, like, I will make time for that, and again, it's just because my priorities and my values, where they lie, is like, if anyone is even thinking about starting a business, like, I'm here to kind of be an open book and to help any way that I can. The second thing is just what brings me inspiration. I think it's being rooted in what I call my 5, 6, 7, which is like, when I ask myself, why do I really want this 5 to 6, 7 times, that's when I truly get to the root as to why I really want to run a business. And for me, my 5, 6, 7, like, the first one is financial freedom, so that my number 6, if my family or my friends ever, whether it's health or whatever it might be, they might need something or whatever, like, at the end of the day, money is a resource, and I want to be able to not only support my family and my friends for whenever they might need help, but number 7 for me is that to give back, that anyone that I can actually help in any which way I can, whether it's through my knowledge, my resources, or even through like actual monetary contributions. Like, I will not be able to do that unless I'm able to, grow this company and get it to a place where, I can have my 5 and my 6, so that I can get that 7. And 1 through 4 is like the boring stuff, like, oh, what do you really want? Oh yeah, I want to you know, 6-figure salary. Oh, why? Oh, good, you know. And as you really dig deeper into why is it that you're pursuing something, or why is it that you want to achieve certain things, I think that's where, like, you know, you kind of see past the tip of the iceberg as to why you may have certain goals or motivations, and you can really, you know, get some introspection and really understand what your like real purpose or meaning, I think, is.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. So that is the end of our panel. You guys can find us. We are tagged on the NYSU.events Instagram, so you can find our Instagrams that way. I'm sure we're open to if you DM us. Yes. So thank you so much, Lloyd.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.